Today's Hat in the Hat challenge is making a hat with plaited fabric. The Corona manual does not refer to it as plaiting. It calls it reversible knitting. But other knitters, including myself, know of the technique as plaiting, so that's what I'm calling it for easier recognition. It involves two yarn, and each yarn shows only on one face of the fabric. We'll talk about choosing yarn. The one on the far right is an ordinary dime store type worsted weight yarn, similar to modern Red Heart Super Saver. I found that it was too thick for the machine to plait comfortably. The one on the left is Mary Lou's Liberty Plus. That worked well when combined with Tam BB. Liberty Plus is not made anymore, but it gets similar effects to Tam Nordic and Karen Simply Soft. They are light number 4 weights, and the BB is a number 2 weight. The effect of plaiting is to actually knit the two yarns at the same time, so they're bulkier than either one of them was by itself, and therefore we turn the stitch dial up 2 or even 3 whole numbers compared to stockinette stitch size. We need access to the auxiliary yarn feeders, which are these. In order to get access, we need to remove one of the main yarn feeders. I have one still in place. Removing the spare is pretty easy, and Jack showed you how to do it in our movie on repairing the yarn feeders. So I'll put a link to that in the program notes. The main yarn, the raspberry color in my case, stays in the main feeder at all times with it fully engaged. The other yarn that we're going to plait with moves to and fro from this auxiliary to this one. Before knitting each row, we'll move it to the leading edge of the carriage. Here it is, correctly positioned, and now we just knit across. I'm just learning to do it here, so I'm going slowly because the machine already had trouble with the thicker yarn, but after I changed yarns, it went just beautifully. Here's a closer look at positioning. The yarn is actually going to ride here as soon as we begin moving left. But if I tuck it where it is, it automatically will pop into the correct position in the feeder. One yarn should show up on the knit side, one on the purl side. In reality, I have found that plaiting feeders vary in how well they do this job. This one is unusually good. Now we're at the left side of the bed, and the yarn needs to be moved to the other feeder. The constant moving may sound laborious, but actually you can get to going quite fast and efficiently once you have the right yarns. Naturally, this is a thicker, warmer fabric because it's got extra yarn involved, and of course that means it also has changed gauge. The change in gauge means that if you use the stitch and row counts we've been working with for most stitches, you'll get an adult-sized hat rather than the child-sized hat we've been working with. So here comes the pattern for an 18-inch by 7-inch tall hat for children. Use 59 stitches, 16 rows of hung hem. Knit the hem with a single strand of project main yarn adjusted to get fairly tight stockinette. 16 rows, hang the hem, one plain row to get that doubled set of stitches off of the needles. Plait for 28 rows. Remember to increase stitch size before starting on the plaiting. Then reduce the stitch size and knit 6 plain rows. As with other bulky fabrics, those 6 plain rows are to keep the crown from being unduly bulky and hard to gather. And because we're using a slightly thinner base yarn than we have used for most of the other hats, we can turn that stitch size for the crown rows down quite a bit. 2 to 3 whole numbers on the dial is workable. And that's it. Scrap off as usual. When the strip comes off of the machine, gather the crown and sew the edges together. One quick word about the reversibility of the hat. The fabric may be reversible, the hat not so much, unless you can find a seam that looks great from both sides.